The 1977 D. Washington quarter dollar, struck at the Denver Mint and bearing the familiar D. Mint mark, occupies an interesting place in modern U.S. numismatics because it sits at the crossroads between the early post-silver era and the maturing period of full copper-nickel-clad coinage. Designed by John Flanagan, whose portrait of George Washington first appeared on the quarter in 1932 to commemorate the bicentennial of Washington's birth, the 1977 D quarter continues the long-running tradition of the Washington design before the dramatic redesign waves of the state quarters, 1999 to 2008, America the Beautiful quarters, 2010 to 2021, and American Women quarters, 2022, present. On the obverse, collectors see the iconic left-facing bust of Washington accompanied by the inscriptions Liberty, overhead, and In God We Trust to his lower left, with the date 1977 placed below the truncation of the bust. The presence of the D. Mint mark to the right of the ribbon in Washington's hair indicates Denver's involvement in the mass production of these pieces. The Denver Mint in the mid-1970s was a high-output facility, striking over 256 million quarters in 1977, so most examples are common. The quarter is composed of outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, a clad structure introduced in 1965 when silver was removed from circulating quarters due to rising silver prices and hoarding. On the reverse, the long-standing heraldic eagle, spreading its wings confidently, perches on a bundle of arrows, symbolizing readiness and defense, while the olive branches beneath represent peace. Surrounding this classical imagery are the inscriptions, United States of America and E Pluribus Unum, the latter a Latin motto meaning, out of many one, signifying the unity of the states. Below the eagle lies the denomination quarter dollar. Even though the 1977 D quarter is generally a common circulation coin, quality varies widely because these clad coins often suffered from weak strikes, bag marks, and dull luster. Therefore, high-grade, uncirculated mint state, MS, examples, especially MS 66 or higher, can be significantly scarcer and more valuable than average circulated pieces. Coins with original, uncirculated mint luster, strong strike details in the eagle's feathers, and minimal contact marks are the most desirable to collectors. Unlike key-date quarters, the 1977 D rarely commands large premiums, but it remains historically appealing as a snapshot of the United States economy and minting practices during the late 1970s, a period marked by inflation, changing metal values, and massive federal production targets to keep enough coinage in circulation. Many people encounter this coin in pocket change without realizing that, despite being common, it represents the continuation of Washington's then 45-year tenure on the quarter and preserved traditional American iconography for another 20 years before large-scale design innovation reshaped U.S. coinage. The combination of its classic design, durable clad composition, historical minting context, and easily recognizable patriotic motifs makes the 1977 D. Washington quarter a small but meaningful artifact of American monetary history, and even if typical circulated pieces are worth only face value, they remain popular among beginning collectors for album filling. While pristine examples, especially those with full mint luster, strong strike, or error characteristics like die cracks, off-center strikes, or double dies can attract sustained collector interest at next top. The 1980 P. Washington quarter dollar, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, occupies a historically significant position in late 20th century American coinage because it represents the maturing era of copper-nickel-clad quarters and marks an important period when Philadelphia began using the P. Mint mark consistently on circulating coinage, something that had not always been standard prior to the late 1970s. On the obverse, the coin features the enduring left-facing portrait of George Washington, sculpted by John Flanagan based on Jean-Antoine Houdon's classical bust, which first appeared on the quarter in 1932. The inscriptions placed around the portrait continue the long-standing tradition of American numismatic design. Liberty stands boldly across the top of the coin, symbolizing the nation's foundational value, while In God We Trust appears to Washington's lower left, a motto that became standard on U.S. coins in the late 19th century and reflects historical national sentiment. The date 1980 sits beneath the bust, indicating the year of issue, with the P mint mark just to the right of the ribbon in Washington's hair, a small but meaningful letter because Philadelphia had historically struck coins without a mint mark, making its late 1970s decision to adopt regular mint marking a noteworthy evolution in U.S. mint identity. Made from a clad composition introduced in 1965 to replace silver, the 1980 P quarter consists of outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving the coin its characteristic pale gray metallic sheen and distinctive clad ring, visible on the edge. This composition solved the chronic silver shortage and hoarding issues that affected U.S. coinage during the mid-1960s. On the reverse, the familiar heraldic eagle design, used from 1932 through 1998, dominates the scene. The eagle stands proudly with wings spread, perched on a bundle of arrows representing vigilance and military readiness, while olive branches beneath symbolize peace, thus balancing strength with diplomacy. Above the eagle is the inscription, United States of America, and just below it is the nation's aspirational motto, E pluribus unum, meaning, out of many, one, referencing both the unity of the original states and the broader American ideal of diverse unity. Beneath the eagle rests the denomination quarter dollar. In terms of production, the 1980 P quarter had an extremely large mintage, over 635 million pieces, reflecting high demand for circulating coinage during a period of inflation and heavy economic activity in the United States. Because of this high output, the coin is generally considered common in circulation, but its condition varies dramatically. The mechanical nature of high-speed minting often introduced weak strikes, particularly visible in the fine details of Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers, as well as contact marks from coins clashing in bags and bins. As a result, finding a true mint state specimen with full luster, sharp details, and minimal abrasions can be surprisingly difficult even among billions minted. High-grade examples, particularly those graded MS 66 or MS 67, become far scarcer and more desirable to collectors, since typical coins from circulation usually show heavy wear on Washington's cheek, jaw, and hair curls, as well as loss of definition in the eagle's tail feathers and wings. There are also known error varieties, such as off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, and occasional die deterioration doubling, although no major mainstream double die variety has been formally recognized for the 1980 P. Still, any unusual striking anomaly on a 1980 P can elevate collector interest because errors on high-mintage modern quarters stand out from the norm. Despite its commonness, the coin reflects a specific moment in U.S. mint history, when the Philadelphia Mint fully embraced its P mint identity, when copper-nickel-clad coinage had become the unquestioned standard, and when Washington's classic portrait remained unchanged for decades before the sweeping redesigns of the late 1990s and early 2000s transformed the quarter series. The 1980 P quarter, though often overlooked as an everyday piece of pocket change, therefore represents a quietly important artifact of American currency, embodying national values, design continuity, evolving minting technology, and the economic conditions of the early 1980s, and whether found in a coin jar, inherited collection, or circulated roll, it carries the imprint of a specific era in American monetary history that continues to interest collectors, especially those who appreciate the subtle variations. And next top, the 1981 P Washington Quarter is part of the long-running Washington Quarter series, first introduced in 1932 to honor the 200th birth anniversary of George Washington, the first president of the United States, and although it precedes the state quarters era by many years, it represents an important transitional period in modern U.S. coinage. Struck at the Philadelphia Mint, the 1981 P quarter bears a small letter, P, mint mark just to the right of Washington's ponytail near the rim, which was only introduced on Philadelphia quarters starting in 1980, making 1981 the second year that the Philadelphia mint mark was ever placed on quarters, and thus somewhat interesting to collectors for historical reasons, even though it is not rare. The coin is composed of the modern clad combination adopted after 1965 when silver coinage was discontinued for circulation, an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper inner core, giving the coin its signature silvery color while remaining inexpensive for mass production. It weighs 5.67 grams, measures 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and has a reeded edge consisting of many small grooves meant originally to deter shaving metal off precious metal coins, but retained on modern clad issues for tradition and tactile identification. The obverse front of the coin features a left-facing portrait of George Washington sculpted by John Flanagan, based on a bust created by the French sculptor Jean-Antoine Houdon in 1785. Above Washington's head appears the word liberty, representing one of the core founding principles of the United States, while to the left in smaller letters is the national motto, "In God We Trust." First used on some U.S. coins during the Civil War and mandated on all coins starting in the 1950s. Beneath the portrait is the year of issue, 1981, identifying the coin's production period during an era of high mintage and widespread circulation. The reverse back displays the long-standing Washington quarter eagle design, also by Flanagan, which shows a heraldic bald eagle with its wings spread wide, perched on a bundle of arrows symbolizing military readiness and strength, while below the arrows rests an olive branch representing peace. Arching above the eagle is the inscription, United States of America, while just beneath it appears the important national motto, E pluribus unum, Latin for out of many one, signifying unity. Among the individual states, at the bottom of the reverse is the denomination quarter dollar, confirming the coin's face value of 25 cents. In terms of mintage, the 1981 P quarter was produced in extremely large quantities, over 601 million pieces, reflecting the heavy demand for small denomination coins in U.S. commerce during the early 1980s. Because of this enormous production number, most examples found today in circulation hold only their face value. In typical worn circulating condition, a 1981 P quarter is worth 25 cents, but slightly better examples, cleaner surfaces, lighter wear, and sharper details, might interest beginners in coin collecting. Higher-grade coins, especially those that have been preserved without circulation, can carry higher value. Coins grading AU, about uncirculated, may be worth slightly more to collectors. Mint state pieces with grades MS, 63 to MS, 65 can be worth a few dollars, and truly exceptional examples with perfect luster, strong strike, and no contact marks, graded MS, 66 and above, may reach higher premiums because they are much scarcer despite the enormous original mintage. The coin's value depends heavily on strike quality, surface preservation, contact marks, and the presence of any notable minting varieties or die errors. Though the 1981 P quarter is not famous for major errors, collectors occasionally encounter coins with die cracks, die breaks, cuds, off-center strikes, broad strikes, or double die anomalies, and such pieces can command increased value depending on the severity and collector demand. Another interesting aspect is that 1981 was a period when the mint was adjusting equipment and die life to accommodate huge production needs, sometimes leading to inconsistent strikes. Therefore, well-struck 1981 P quarters with sharp hair details on Washington's portrait and fully distinct eagle feathers on the reverse are more desirable and less common in top grades. Although not silver, the coin is important for representing an era in which clad coinage had become fully normalized after the removal of silver from circulating quarters in 1965, and it remains a staple in U.S. pocket change. For collectors, owning a high-quality 1981 P quarter can fill a place in a Dayton Mintmark next top. The 1983 P Washington quarter is a widely circulated yet surprisingly significant coin in modern U.S. numismatics, partly because of its historical context and partly because of unusual circumstances surrounding its mintage, and understanding it fully requires looking at its origin, its design symbolism, its production quality, and the economic environment of the early 1980s. The quarter continues the long-running Washington Quarter series, first introduced in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, using the iconic John Flanagan designs that remain on circulation strikes until 1998. The obverse front displays the classic left-facing portrait of George Washington based on the celebrated 1785 bust by French sculptor Jean-Antoine Houdon, chosen because of its lifelike realism and historical accuracy. Above his head is the inscription Liberty, symbolizing the founding ideal of the United States, while to Washington's left appears the national motto, "In God We Trust," which became mandatory on all U.S. coins by the 1950s and represents the nation's religious heritage and philosophical identity. Below the portrait sits the date 1983, marking the year of production. The reverse back features a majestic bald eagle with outstretched wings perched on a bundle of arrows, representing national defense, strength, and readiness, while beneath the arrows is an olive branch symbolizing peace. The upper reverse reads, United States of America, and just below that is the historic motto, E pluribus unum, Latin for out of many one, declaring the unity of the states into one nation. At the bottom is the denomination $quarter. The 1983 P quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint and carries the P mint mark, which had only recently begun appearing on Philadelphia struck quarters starting in 1980. The coin is made of standard clad composition, consisting of an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving it durability and a bright silvery appearance without using precious metal. It weighs 5.67 grams, measures 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and features a reeded edge with small grooved lines, a holdover from the era when reeding was used to prevent shaving silver from coin edges. What makes the 1983 P quarter unusually important is that it was produced during a time when the U.S. Mint did not issue official uncirculated mint sets in 1982 or 1983, meaning that collectors did not have easy access to high-quality examples stored away before entering circulation. Because there were no mint sets for those years, most 1983 P quarters were released directly into everyday use, where they experience heavy wear, making well-preserved coins from this year surprisingly scarce despite a high production total of over 673 million pieces. Circulated examples are extremely common, but nice, sharply struck, or uncirculated coins are much harder to find than their mintage suggests. This absence of mint sets is why the 1983 P quarter is known as a modern key date in high grade, often worth more than most other clad Washington quarters from the 1970s, 1990s, when found in pristine condition. Quality varies significantly because the mint was prioritizing quantity during the early 1980s due to economic changes, inflation, and coin shortages. Many coins were struck with tired dies or received numerous bag marks. In typical circulated condition, a 1983 P quarter is worth its face value, 25 cents, but moderately nicer examples with above-average detail or lighter wear can interest collectors. However, mint state uncirculated coins, especially grades MS 63, MS 64, MS 65 or higher, can be worth several dollars to much more depending on strike and luster. High-end grading levels like MS 66 and MS 67 are significantly scarcer and command strong collector premiums due to the limited surviving population. A small number of exceptionally high-grade examples, especially those with full luster and minimal contact marks, can be quite valuable in the modern coin market. The 1983 P quarter is also known among error collectors for the famous 1983 doubled die reverse (DDR) variety, in which strong doubling can be seen on the inscriptions E pluribus unum, United States of America, or the eagle's feathers. Such pieces are highly collectible and often sell for substantially more than regular strikes. Other mint errors, including off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, and dramatic die breaks, cuts, also appear and can raise a coin's value. Collectors appreciate the 1983 P not only for its potential premium value, but also next top. The 1986 D Washington quarter, minted at the Denver Mint and marked with a D mint mark, is part of the long-running Washington Quarter series first issued in 1932 to honor the 200th birthday of George Washington, and by 1986 it still retained the classic design created by sculptor John Flanagan. The obverse features a left-facing bust of Washington, the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the mint mark positioned to the right of Washington's ponytail, with the date 1986 at the bottom. The reverse bears the heraldic eagle with outstretched wings clutching a bundle of arrows above an olive branch, along with the inscriptions, United States of America and E Pluribus Unum, with $quarter at the bottom. Made of the standard clad composition used since 1965, an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, the coin weighs 5.67 grams, measures 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and has a reeded edge. The Denver Mint struck approximately 504 million 1986 D quarters, making it a very common issue in the series and one that still turns up frequently in circulation today. Because it was produced decades after silver coinage ended, it contains no silver and is typically valued at 25 cents in circulated condition, though sharply struck uncirculated examples with clean surfaces can be worth $1 to $5, and certified mint state 65 to 67 examples may reach $20 to $75 depending on quality and market demand. While the 1986 D has no famous rare varieties, collectors pay attention to subtle die cracks, die chips, weak strikes, off-center strikes, broad strikes, and filled mint mark anomalies which, though uncommon, can bring premiums if dramatic and visually appealing. Historically, quarters of this era were produced in massive numbers to meet the growing needs of commerce during the mid-1980s, making high-grade gems harder to find because most coins entered circulation immediately and sustained wear. For numismatists, the coin represents an accessible and inexpensive piece of late 20th century U.S. monetary history, bridging the gap between the early Washington quarters and the later commemorative designs that began with the 1999 state quarters program. Although not rare, an untitled/uncirculated 1986 D quarter with full details, especially a bright, original example with strong luster, can still be a desirable addition to date and mint mark collections or error typesets, preserving the period's engraving style and manufacturing characteristics while offering insight into U.S. mint production standards of the time. Next top. The 1987 P. Washington Quarter, struck at the Philadelphia Mint and carrying the P. mint mark, is part of the long-established Washington Quarter series first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, and by 1987 it continued to use the iconic design created by sculptor John Flanagan, which remained unchanged on circulation strikes until the 1999 state quarters program. The obverse of the 1987 P. quarter features a left-facing portrait of George Washington with the inscriptions Liberty above his head and In God We Trust to the left, with the year 1987 centered below the truncation of the bust. The mint mark, P, is placed to the right of Washington's hair ribbon. On the reverse, the traditional heraldic eagle stands prominently with wings spread, clutching a bundle of arrows symbolizing strength and readiness to defend the nation, perched above an olive branch representing peace, with the inscriptions, United States of America, above, E Pluribus Unum, beneath the eagle's head, and $quarter, rounding out the bottom. Like all regular issue quarters produced after the end of circulating silver coinage in 1964, the 1987 P quarter is made of a copper-nickel clad composition, consisting of outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving the coin its familiar silvery appearance despite containing no precious metal. It weighs 5.67 grams, measures 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and has a reeded edge. The Philadelphia Mint struck roughly nearly 1 billion 1987 P quarters, about 952 million, making it a very common circulation issue of the late 1980s, though high-grade examples are less common because most entered day-to-day use immediately and accumulated contact marks, scratches, and dulling of the mint luster. In circulated condition, the coin typically retains only face value of 25 cents, but attractive uncirculated pieces can be worth $1 to $5, while sharply struck, lustrous coins certified in mint state 65 to 67 may bring $15 to $60, and exceptional grading service, top pops, can be worth more to registry collectors. Although the 1987 P has no widely recognized major varieties, specialists look for small but interesting error types, such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, die cracks on Washington's bust, die chips around lettering or the eagle's wings, double dies, rare and usually minor, and misaligned dies that yield uneven rims. Dramatic examples of these errors can sell for premiums depending on severity and visual appeal. Historically, the 1987 P quarter reflects a period of heavy U.S. mint production to meet growing cash transaction demands in the pre-digital economy, and its design represents one of the final decades of the classic heraldic eagle reverse before the unforeseen explosion of collectible reverse programs beginning in 1999. While the 1987 P quarter is extremely easy to find in circulation even today, an uncirculated, untuned, fully lustrous example with strong strike detail remains desirable for collectors assembling a complete Dayton Mintmark set or for those studying late 20th century minting technology, die-wear patterns, and the evolving quality control practices of the U.S. Mint. Next top. The 1988 D United States of America quarter dollar, bearing the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and E Pluribus Unum, is part of the long-running Washington Quarter series, which began in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. And the 1988 issue remained within the series' traditional design before the state quarter program dramatically changed it in 1999. Produced at the Denver Mint, these coins carry the D Mint mark located on the obverse to the right of Washington's ponytail, and the 1988 D quarter had a large mintage, over 596 million pieces, reflecting typical late 20th century production volumes when quarters were heavily used in commerce. Struck on planchets composed of copper-nickel clad, an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. The coin weighs 5.67 grams, measures 24.26 millimeters in diameter, features a reeded edge, and has the well-known portrait of George Washington by sculptor John Flanagan on the obverse. Meanwhile, the reverse, unchanged from 1932 until the introduction of special commemorative designs, shows the heraldic eagle with spread wings clutching a bundle of arrows with 2 olive branches beneath, a symbol of military readiness balanced with the pursuit of peace. The legends United States of America, E Pluribus Unum, and quarter dollar appear above and below the eagle, a layout recognizable to any collector of modern circulating U.S. coinage. Although billions of Washington quarters circulated between the 1965 clad transition and the 1990s, 1988 coins still appear frequently in pocket change because they were not removed from circulation en masse the way silver coins were, and they contain no silver, meaning their baseline value is generally there. Face value unless in exceptional condition. For collectors, condition is everything. A mint state, MS, example graded MS, 65 or higher can carry a premium, while typical circulated pieces show flattening on Washington's hair, smoothing of the cheek and jaw, and wear on the eagle's breast feathers. Sharp luster, clean surfaces, and strong strike quality characterize the more desirable uncirculated specimens. The Denver Mint's 1988 production quality is considered average for the era, yet certain minor varieties exist, such as die cracks, filled die mint marks, light doubling on lettering, or misaligned dies, though none are widely recognized as major, high-value varieties. Nevertheless, collectors sometimes pay modest premiums for interesting mint errors including off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, and die breaks, especially when these errors are dramatic and well-preserved. For those wondering about investment value, a pristine 1988 D quarter can fetch a few dollars to several tens of dollars depending on grade, with exceptional examples certified MS 67 or MS 68 commanding significantly more due to rarity and top condition. However, nearly all circulated examples remain worth 25 cents. Historically, this coin sits at an interesting moment. It represents the last decade before modern state commemorative quarters reshaped public interest in coin collecting, and it is among the vast sea of standard design Washington quarters that Americans handled daily for generations. Its inscriptions, "In God We Trust," adopted widely on U.S. coins after the Civil War, "Liberty," echoing the core national value, and "E Pluribus Unum," the long-standing motto meaning, "out of many, one," tie it deeply to American numismatic tradition. For identification, genuine 1988 D quarters should have crisp lettering, correct weight and diameter, non-magnetic metal composition, and appropriate reading. Counterfeit risk is extremely low because the face value is so small, though novelty or altered coins appear occasionally. In summary, the 1988 D Washington quarter is a common but historically interesting piece, offering insight into U.S. mint practices, late 20th century commerce, and numismatic design continuity, and while not rare, it remains a frequently collected coin for beginners and a representative example of America's everyday circulating currency before the dramatic redesign era. The next top. The 1989 United States of America quarter dollar, bearing the familiar Washington portrait along with the inscriptions "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the reverse motto, "E Pluribus Unum," represents one of the final pre-statehood, traditional Washington quarters produced before the massive wave of design changes in the late 1990s. Struck at the Philadelphia Mint, the P. Mint mark sits on the obverse side to the right of George Washington's ponytail, and this issue was produced in very high quantities, over 512 million pieces, which makes it common in circulation today and easily found in pocket change, though pristine mint state examples remain desirable to collectors. The coin continues the Washington quarter design introduced in 1932 to celebrate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, featuring the bust sculpted by John Flanagan, whose interpretation was based on the bust by Jean-Antoine Houdon. In 1989, the obverse portrait still carried the strong profile lines, the slightly arched "Liberty" inscription above, and "In God We Trust," placed to the left of Washington's neck, a layout that had become a defining image of late 20th century U.S. currency. As with all clad quarters minted after the 1965 transition away from silver, the 1989 P quarter has a copper-nickel outer layer, 75% copper, 25% nickel, bonded to a pure copper core, resulting in a characteristic two-tone edge that shows the copper stripe inside the reeded rim. The coin weighs 5.67 g, measures 24.26 millimeters in diameter, has a thickness of 1.75 millimeters, and bears a reeded edge, all standard specifications for Washington quarters of the era. The reverse design, unchanged since 1932, displays the heraldic eagle with spread wings, clutching a bundle of arrows symbolizing national defense and resting upon two olive branches representing peace, with United States of America above the eagle and "E Pluribus Unum" centered just below the wings, while quarter dollar curves along the bottom. This design later disappeared in 1999 when the state quarter program began, making pre-1999 quarters like the 1989 P increasingly interesting to collectors for their historical continuity. Although hundreds of millions were minted, the value of a circulated 1989 P quarter normally remains 25 cents because most examples saw heavy everyday use and show typical wear patterns such as flattening of Washington's hair curls, smoothing across the cheek and jaw, and loss of feathered detail on the eagle's breast. Only higher-grade coins, especially those in mint state, MS 65, MS 66, MS 67 or higher, gain collector premiums, with the finest survivors, those showing strong strike definition, original mint luster, and minimal contact marks, fetching noticeably higher prices due to the difficulty of preserving modern clad coins in flawless condition. The Philadelphia Mint in the late 1980s produced coins with generally decent but not perfect strike quality, meaning collectors often look for well-struck examples with crisp details in Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers. Weak strikes are common, especially on the reverse. While 1989 P quarters do not have any widely recognized major varieties, minor collectible features can occur, including die cracks, small cuts, raised blobs from broken dies, filled die mint marks or letters, and occasional light doubling on the date or motto, though such pieces usually command only modest premiums unless the error is dramatic. More spectacular mint errors, such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, rotated dies, and multiple strike errors, are known for various years including 1989 and can bring higher values depending on severity, visual appeal, and preservation. However, these are error coin specialties and not part of the normal 1989 production. The historical context of this coin is noteworthy because it sits a decade before the numismatic boom sparked by the 50 state quarters program, meaning that many 1980s clad quarters were largely overlooked at the time, used heavily, and rarely saved in pristine condition. This is why high-grade examples are scarcer and more collectible today. The motto, "In God We Trust," which originated on U.S. coins in the 19th century, reflects a long-standing tradition, while liberty represents the ideological foundation of the United States. Meanwhile, E pluribus unum, used since 1795, translates to out of many one, emphasizing unity among the states and giving the coin symbolic depth beyond its everyday transactional function. Identifying a genuine 1989 quarter involves checking for proper weight, non-magnetic. Next top. The 1992 Washington quarter dollar, minted at the Philadelphia Mint, as shown by the P mint mark on the obverse, is part of the long-running Washington quarter series that began in 1932 to commemorate the 200th birthday of George Washington, and by 1992 it had already become one of the most familiar circulating coins in the United States. The obverse features the classic bust of Washington designed by sculptor John Flanagan, accompanied by the inscriptions "Liberty, in God We Trust," and beneath the portrait the mint mark and date, while the reverse retains the traditional heraldic eagle design with outstretched wings perched atop a bundle of arrows with olive branches below, and the inscriptions "United States of America, E pluribus unum," and "quarter dollar." The 1992 quarter is made of a clad copper-nickel composition, outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded over a pure copper core, and weighs 5.67 grams with a diameter of 24.26 millimeters and a reeded edge. It was produced in very large numbers, hundreds of millions, meaning that most examples are still common in circulation and generally worth face value unless found in exceptionally high grade or with special errors. Collectors often look for well-struck examples with minimal contact marks and in mint state, MS 65 or higher. The coin can command a modest premium, though it is not considered rare. However, certain error varieties, such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, die cracks, die clashes, or missing clad layer errors, can significantly increase value depending on severity. The inscriptions "In God We Trust" and "E pluribus unum" reflect long-standing national mottos embedded into U.S. coinage, with "In God We Trust" first appearing in the 19th century and "E pluribus unum," Latin for "out of many one," representing national unity. A normal 1992 quarter shows clear lettering, an evenly struck eagle on the reverse, and uniform luster when uncirculated, but circulation wear typically dulls the high points such as Washington's hair, cheekbone, and the eagle's breast feathers. Although not part of a special or transitional series, 1992 precedes the launch of the 50 state quarters program, 1999 to 2008. It remains an interesting issue for collectors who enjoy assembling complete date and mint mark sets from the pre-state quarter era. In summary, the 1992 quarter is a standard modern circulating coin with historical continuity, widely accessible to collectors, valuable chiefly for its educational interest, design heritage, and condition-sensitive examples rather than next top. The 1995 Washington quarter dollar, struck at the Philadelphia Mint and identified by the P mint mark located on the obverse to the right of George Washington's ponytail, is part of the long-running Washington quarter series that began in 1932 and continued with the same general design until the start of the state quarters program in 1999, making 1995 one of the final years of the classic eagle reverse design. The obverse features John Flanagan portrait of George Washington, accompanied by the inscriptions "Liberty, in God We Trust," and the date 1995, while the reverse displays the traditional heraldic eagle with outstretched wings perched on a bundle of arrows, with olive branches beneath symbolizing the balance of strength and peace, surrounded by the inscriptions United States of America, E pluribus unum, and $quarter. The coin has a copper-nickel-clad composition consisting of outer layers made of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, weighs 5.67 grams, measures 24.26 millimeters in diameter, and features a reeded edge to prevent historical practices, such as shaving or clipping metal from the rim. The Philadelphia Mint produced the 1995 P quarter in very high quantities, hundreds of millions, making the coin extremely common in circulation, and as a result most examples are worth only face value, unless found in high levels of preservation. Collectors often look for sharply struck examples with bright mint luster, especially those graded MS 65 or higher, which show crisp details in Washington's hair, cheekbone, and jawline on the obverse, as well as strong feather definition on the eagle's chest and wings on the reverse. Although the date has no major die varieties considered rare, error specimens do exist, including off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, die chips, struck-through grease errors, and missing clad layer errors, all of which can significantly increase value depending on severity and eye appeal. The inscriptions "In God We Trust" and "E pluribus unum" reflect foundational national mottos, the former representing religious heritage and its adoption onto U.S. coinage in the 19th century, and the latter, Latin for "out of many, one," symbolizing the unity of states forming a single nation. On a normal 1995 P quarter, these inscriptions should be clearly struck, evenly spaced, and free from major distortion, though heavy circulation often results in smoothing of the lettering along with flattening of Washington's hair detail and the eagle's feathering. By 1995, the Washington quarter had become an everyday workhorse of U.S. commerce, and the 1995 P issue serves as a representative example of late 20th century American coinage before the dramatic redesign shift of 1999. Although not rare, it holds interest for hobbyists assembling full date and mint sets or studying minting variations from the era. Overall, the 1995 P Washington $quarter remains a widely available piece of U.S. numismatic history, valued more for its classic design, historical context, and collectible condition pieces than for rarity, making it an accessible and educational coin for both new and experienced collectors.